Welcome to Sustainable Cleveland 2020 Virtual Summit. We would like to thank our host for the summit, the Cleveland Public Library. My name is Deepa Vedavyas. I'm the Sustainability Manager with the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, and you have joined the breakout session on getting to 100% clean and renewable electricity in Cleveland. We ask that you remain muted throughout this session, and please use the chat box at the top right of your screen for questions or comments. Please also check the chat box for resources that would be shared periodically during the session. Thank you, Elsa, for helping us out and sharing the resources. And finally, please note that this session is being recorded. I hope to play a dual role today by being the moderator as well as a panelist briefly. So kindly bear with me if I don't get to your questions in the chat box sooner. Before starting this session, I would like to share that this is the first of many conversations on this topic regarding 100% clean and renewable electricity commitment. For a conversation on city-specific efforts and our ongoing work on renewable energy, please join us for our November monthly meeting. Today, we have a great lineup of panelists from Cleveland and Atlanta. I apologize as I'm also trying to check my messages and balance everything. So we have Matt here from Atlanta, who is the founder and CEO of GreenLink Analytic. He is an energy research and advisory. No, it is an energy research and advisory nonprofit based in Atlanta, Georgia. He has authored over 80 scientific publications, and his policy recommendation have been adopted by dozens of cities and states, the US government, and other nations. He currently leads GreenLink's energy and equity work with 75 cities across the country. We are very excited to have Matt Cox as our consultant for City of Cleveland's implementation plan. He will be sharing data analysis and Cleveland's energy burden map that they have been working on for the past few months, and also a few similar examples of their work from other cities. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Matt. Next, we also have another panelist, Divya Sridhar. She is a manager of climate resiliency and sustainability at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. In her role, she manages programs and projects at the intersection of sustainable land management and equitable resource management. Currently, these are reforestation projects and programs, collaborations around local air quality, water equity, and an interdisciplinary cumulative impacts working group. She is a certified permaculture designer from Midwest Permaculture Institute under Peter Bain. She has a master's in architecture from Kent State University and an undergraduate degree in architecture from Madras University, India. Divya will be sharing with us today about intentional collaborative engagements with community and institutions to advance policies and programs in Cleveland. Thank you, Matt and Divya, for joining us for this discussion. We will start the presentation by providing an overview of Mayor's commitment and City of Cleveland's work towards it. As we, one request I would have for the presenters are when one presenter is presenting, the other two presenters can turn off their video and audio so we can have better connectivity. Thank you very much. So I'll get started. Sustainable Cleveland, as our Chief Jason Wood mentioned yesterday during the inaugural function, as he was right to point out that as a city, we are working towards embedding sustainability as a value in everything we do, and hope it is evident in all our summit session in the past 2 days. This breakout will specifically focus on 100% clean and renewable electricity, a commitment by 2050. Why should Cleveland residents care about this? Electricity represents a large fraction of our total energy consumed within the city of Cleveland and nationally. It is the same case, and traditionally energy sources are primarily from fossil fuel sources, and we are well aware of the negative impacts associated with that. Achieving to 100% renewable electricity is not just about replacing fossil fuels with renewable sources in today's energy system. It can also serve as a means for socioeconomic development and help create equitable societies for the current and future generations. To know more about what we mean by energy within sustainability context, please refer to the blog Energy 101 on our sustainablecleveland.org webpage, which will also be shared by Elsa on the chat box. Commitment, approach, and implementation plan are the three aspects that this presentation will focus on. In 2018, Mayor Frank Jackson committed to the goal of 100% clean and renewable electricity by 2050. Cleveland became the first city in Ohio to commit to this goal. To date, 160 plus cities and towns across US have committed to this target. Approach. How do we break down this 2050 vision? The process towards achieving our vision calls for transparency, as that helps foster accountability and motivation. As a first step in the process, we hope to create this implementation plan, which would allow us to translate and reduce the complexity of the vision to everyday language by establishing metrics and benchmarks, which GreenLink Analytics is helping us accomplish that goal. And as towards the step of completing the plan, we also would like to emphasize that it's very important for us to hear from the people in the community affected by utility burden to share their voice. And as the first, we have created a clean energy and a survey that is available in our blog, which will also be shared in the chat box shortly. I would strongly encourage for you to share that widely and also to take that survey so we can hear from you about your thoughts and your commitment. And if you'd like to stay engaged in this conversation, there is a section in the survey that requires to fill out contact information. That is probably one of the ways we can continue to help you stay connected with this discussion and reach out to you for future. And outreach is definitely a key component of realizing the vision, connecting and spreading the word among residents, clean energy advocates, and engaging with ambassadors in the city. Collaboration is one other key aspects, and we cannot accomplish this goal without partnerships and collaborations. Achieving collective ethos by sharing the goals and milestone publicly is our way that we hope to implement this vision. If you have been part of the Lead for Cities breakout earlier yesterday, this slide might be familiar to you. And this slide, what I hope to represent is we have had our climate action plan updated in 2018, and many of you have stayed engaged in the process during that time. And what you see to the left are some of the climate action plan priority areas with energy efficiency, green building, clean energy, sustainable transportation, and all these sustainable categories also is very much aligned with Lead for Cities certification process that City of Cleveland is currently undergoing. And we are pleased to share that City of Cleveland is one of the 20 cities within the country which has been selected for a technical grant that would allow us to get technical help from US Green Building Council to go through the certification process. And many of the categories, and all of the categories within the Lead for Cities also aligns very well with our climate action goals and other programmatic efforts. Nationally, we have seen how it aligns with LEED, and LEED also being an international rating system. 100% renewable energy efforts and work also aligns with UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's a wide range of co-benefits that are linked to renewable energy development and integrated policy approach. To further break it down, in 2018, the World Futures Council had released a report documentation, which also would be shared if you have an interest in the detailed report in the chat box on how 100% renewable energy effort supports the UN SDG goals. And I'm going to not be able to read all the 17 goals and its linkages, but I would like to at least point out a few that is of greater value within our city. First one is no poverty. Working towards 100% renewable energy goal not only allows us to have reliable access and low-cost energy, but also acts as a tool to generate income for low-income communities. And we'll be seeing shortly as to how the energy burden maps would help us inform of our efforts to be targeted. And goal 7 on affordable and clean energy allows us to have renewable accessing renewable energy is a prerequisite for development and quality of life. And goal 8 talks about decent work and economic growth. Having renewable energy efforts in the city will boost inclusive and sustainable economic growth. And I would like to point to the goal number 13, which talks about climate action. Energy being a carbon intensive sector, any and every effort that the city does towards reduction of our carbon emission would automatically tie in to the UN goal of climate action number 13. And 11 talks about cities being the key agents of change. And cannot, definitely that is a statement so true. You know, any effort unless scaled is not going to be significant. And 17, you know, the most important of all is partnerships for the goals. Strong cross-sectoral trans-regional partnerships are key to accomplish and implement this goal. Equitable Clean Energy Implementation Plan would allow us to create a pathway towards an implementation process. In 2019, we had secured Partners for Places grant to develop community-wide energy transition plan. And our core partners in this are Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Gray Consulting, Cleveland Foundation, United Black Fund, the George Glenn Foundation, and Green Link Analytics, who are helping us with the data analysis and technical part of implementation plan. The plan itself will take a comprehensive approach, and it would inform us of policies through various mapping tools and scenario comparison tools, which Matt would be touching upon. And there's a heavy focus on energy equity, and it can be achieved only through collaborative efforts. So we anticipate the plan to be substantially complete by the end of the year and hope to be made it available by early next year. This completes my part of the overview, and I would like to invite Matt to share share some of the most exciting work that they are doing for us in the city of Cleveland. Matt, you can take it away.
Well, thank you very much. And that was wonderful, Tifa. We're having a little bit of an issue getting my ability to do a screen share. So I'm not sure.
Want me to do that for you, Matt? I have the slides printed.
That would be great. Aton's got them as well. So we're triggering all the backups.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I have them ready.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You let me know, and I'll forward the slides for you.
Great. Okay, so if we jump to the next slide. Hello, I'm Matt Cox. I'm the CEO and co-founder of GreenLink Analytics. We're a 501c3 based in Atlanta that primarily does energy and equity research. We're currently working with about 75 cities across the US to help them evaluate ways to advance the ball on both clean energy and equity issues. If we go to the next slide, we'll see some of the baseline information for Cleveland that's been collected. So what we see here is that buildings are the predominant source of greenhouse gas emissions in Cleveland, accounting for 44% of the total. And then electricity is the largest source of those emissions. We're also seeing that consumption has been growing in the recent years. And Cleveland, as a municipal government, has been participating in trying to track their energy consumption and their CO2 footprint by benchmarking their facilities, and so has done so with 95% of the buildings that they oversee, and has performed energy audits at, as you can see, more than 70 facilities. If we go to the next slide, thank you. We can see our preliminary forecast of what the electricity mix will look like for Cleveland through the next 15 years. So what you see out of this is that right now, coal is responsible for just about half of the electricity coming in to Cleveland. You have natural gas making up about a third beyond that. You've got nuclear coming in for another portion, and then this little sliver of renewables up at the very top in the blue. The main storyline about the next 15 years is the growth of gas, the reduction in coal, and the growth in renewables. You see, nuclear shrinks as well, but as far as big shifts, it's a lot of gas for coal, and then this increase in the renewable side. So these are preliminary. We're going to continue to refine these, but this is kind of our early stage look at what we think the power supply is going to look like over the course of the next 15 years. If we take a look at the next slide, you can see how some of these choices translate into costs. And so this is a map that's taking a look at Cleveland. And so we should be seeing that the Cleveland utility burdens are significantly beyond the national average. So utility burden is the percent of household income that is spent on utility bills. So generally this is calculated either for electricity or electricity and gas combined. And when we take a look at the national average, the energy burden across the country averages about 3.3% of income towards these bills. In Cleveland, the average energy burden is up at 6.6%. So it is essentially double what the national average is. There's a lot of reasons to be concerned with that, even if the number sounds like it's relatively small. We have what's been reported back in the results of the studies that have gone on this particular issue for the better part of the last decade is that people who experience high utility burdens are also very likely to be users of short-term loan products. And that's actually the number one reason that people use things like payday loans, is to pay a utility bill. Information from the federal government is also highlighting that you have a third of the families in the country have skipped a meal or getting a prescription filled in order to pay a utility bill. So there are real quality of life impacts for people who are living with high energy burdens. And then when we look at Cleveland in specifics, you can see that race is another reason to be concerned here. The 20 least burdened areas, so these are by census tract is what's on the map. The 20 least burdened census tract range from energy burdens that are going from 2 to 3%. And all of them are they're 72% white or greater in those census tracts. The 20 most burdened areas all have energy burdens that exceed 22%. So, 11 times higher. And only 3 of them are not predominantly Black. The average income in those high burden areas is under $15,000 per year. And the average income in those very low burdened areas is $135,000 per year. And those types of relationships are things that we can tease out and explore in greater depth. But that, I think, gives some good grounding here. If we go to the next slide, so the map that we were just looking at was an output of a new equity platform that we just launched called GEM. And it's tracking data across 20 different equity indicators for about 50 cities in the US right now, Cleveland being one of them. And so these are some of the indicators that we are tracking and that you can see data for. So we have racial composition, energy burden, water burden, the number of households that exceed various energy burden thresholds. So 3% being about that national average, 6% being what's considered overburdened, and then 10% being considered energy poverty. We can take a look at where households are that are struggling with that particular, with those kinds of burdens and those issues. We are also adding health indicators, so asthma rates and a lack of health insurance, which is especially problematic given a global pandemic that's running and ramping up again. And then we have a number of housing indicators, so things like eviction rates, the cost of living, the number of households who have a living burden, so essentially like rent that takes more than 30% of their income, whether it's renter or owner, single family, multifamily. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice the data and to take a look at it. And we're happy that we'll be able to use this tool with Cleveland as a part of this planning process. The next slide shows one other thing that we also want to highlight and thank the folks in Cleveland who helped us develop this. But we've just also released alongside the mapping platform a process guide that walks through how to use the platform with community to reach joint meaning making, so that there's a shared understanding of what the data is and what kind of values and responses we want to bring to that data, what kind of steps we ought to make around it. And that's available on the website at equitymap.org. If we go to the next slide, we'll go through a couple of examples that are more related to Atlanta. So we helped the city of Atlanta do their 100% clean energy plan. And these are some of the types of findings that we were able to produce from the outreach that was done there. So there's a heavy focus on getting community input and part of survey that was launched as a part of the Atlanta plan. The main things that we found were that energy equity was a priority of the people in the community, in the city. Investments in energy efficiency must be increased, and that local investments in renewable energy should be prioritized over investments in renewable energy outside the metro area. There's a survey that we've been developing with Cleveland that should be coming along as well. I believe we're ready for that to go out. So we're going to start trying to get, at least 3,000, hopefully more than that, people to respond to that survey. So please take it and tell your friends. Let's get as many people responded to this as we can, so that we've got the true views reflected in what we're able to plan with. The next slide shows a little bit about the process and the analytical tools that we'll be using. So I heard that there might be some technical folks who were part of the conversation today. So we are using Athenia and ACES, which are two of GreenLink's internal modeling tools to take a look at potential futures for Cleveland. Athenia is a deep learning artificial intelligence model that learns how the energy system works in and around Cleveland and allows us to build forecasts of how it will react to potential changes going out into the future. And so we use that to help really dial in what's going to happen hour by hour for the next 40 years. That's a part of the modeling process here. And then we can use that to identify all kinds of very interesting outputs, which we feed into the ACES tool. And ACES allows us to evaluate different development pathways that the city might want to pursue in order to achieve the goal. So we force it so that you can't not hit your target, but it's really through the use of things like renewable energy credits that may not be desirable that shortcomings in certain pathways get exposed. We get to see that. So if we click the next slide, this is an example of ACES, which we deployed with Orlando. If you're watching the news today, the Orlando Utilities Commission announced that they will retire all coal by 2027 and will be at zero carbon by the time that we put forward in this plan a year and a half ago with them. So we're very happy to see that come along. But this allows us to dial up or to dial back various resources based on the potential that exists within the particular city. So we can say we want to get all of the available residential energy efficiency, for example. And if we do that, we can see outputs in ACES about what it will cost to do that, what the benefits will be. And then we see a whole host of other related impacts that come back that are actually probably the thing we all care about more than whether it's cost effective, but how many jobs will this create? What will this do for local incomes? How will these investments impact public health? What do we see in terms of change of overall CO2 emissions? How will this investment strategy and this pathway impact our energy burden across the entire community? Those are the kinds of things that ACES will produce for us that we'll be then able to explore and again, get more feedback on, is this the kind of pathway that we want to pursue, or is there another direction that we'd like to take? So the next slide starts to dig into the three that we used predominantly in Atlanta to walk through the examples. So we had scenario one, which we called business as usual, which was no additional effort beyond where the market would take you right now. We had scenario two, which was our 50% clean energy scenario, which was setting all of those values to 50%. So going after half of the available potential. And then we had the most aggressive scenario, the 100% scenario. And so that was going after everything as much as we could. So the next slide shows the results of scenario one for Atlanta. We also called this the oops, I bumped my head and it's 2035 scenario. So you like Rumpelstiltskin that and you just wake up and here you are. And in that case, Atlanta would end up achieving the goal almost entirely through the purchase of renewable energy credits. So we can see there's a certain amount of solar that gets developed. In total, it's equal to about 15% of the total electricity demand in the city. Then there's another 3% or so coming from existing hydro resources. And then you have the vast majority of it being this 82% block of renewable energy credits that the city would need to buy. And so you can see the costs of that. It's not that expensive. It's about $1 million that's discounted. So we would expect they're going to actually cost more than that in 2035. But in today's dollars, it's about $1 million. But it creates no jobs. It's supporting wind farms in Texas and Oklahoma predominantly. There's not any sort of bill savings to be reported back. So this one's kind of like the most pessimistic, nobody likes this type of answer. Another example is scenario two, so that's the next slide. And so that's the 50% effort. And you can see from this that you've got cumulative benefits coming in from going after half of the energy efficiency. This is half of the efficiency and half of the solar potential that exists within the city. We are able to get cumulative benefits of about $15.5 billion at a cost of just under 400 million. So the net benefits are just about 15 billion. The benefit cost ratio is 40 to 1 on that. And then you produce quite a few jobs. So there's 4,250 more jobs produced in this scenario than there would have been otherwise, which is about the equivalent. You know, we try to put these into equivalencies that will speak to the community. So in Atlanta, Coca-Cola is a good one. So we had, this is the equivalent of 2 new Coca-Colas moving in as a way to try to make that resonate. Local incomes increase by just under $1 billion, which is a little over $100 per year for the next 15 years for the average Atlanta resident. Public health savings were just over 200 million. And then metric tons of CO2 reduced was 5.3 million metric tons, which was about 7 months without cars. And I think anybody in a big city, if you're thinking back, we're going, that was kind of incredible to imagine. And then COVID has just made that actually realistic. And you probably just have to remember back a few months to think about what the city was like with very few cars going through it. And then we had these final values here that we would show that were another way to take a look at equity. So it was, what was the effect of people who were able to access the programming? So if the city started to push out more energy efficiency programming, for example, what was the effect on their bills? And so we could see in this scenario, their bills dropped by $140. And then the question was, well, what also happens to the people who are not able to get into that program? And what the model is telling us is that their bills would actually drop by $35 because this streamlined and reduced some costs that the utility would have otherwise needed to make. That may or may not be the case in Cleveland. We'll have to see what happens there. But it can definitely help us understand what the effects are going to be for those who are able to get into the programs and those who are not. And it can help think about programming and how to deliver the energy programs that we're trying to establish. The last slide that I've got starts to go from potentials and trying to understand what values we'd like to emphasize towards actual policy options to get there. And so this is an example of a dashboard that we built for Orlando. And this is actually something that the National Renewable Energy Lab now carries a toolkit that they will recommend towards folks. But it helps us take a look at the kinds of options. So are these financing options? Are these programs? Are we trying to advance specific technologies? And then it also takes a look at feasibility and impact. So generally, how difficult is it to get this type of program in place? And then also, what's the payoff for that? Are these going to be very impactful? So maybe it's really difficult to do, but it has a big impact. Or maybe it's really difficult to do and it's also not very impactful. And so you can start to delist that, put that lower on the priority side of things. So we'll be working with all the folks in Cleveland, drawing on the results of the surveys and the community conversations and everything like that to try to help create something that looks similar for Cleveland in particular. So with that, I'm going to call it quits on my side, but thank you very much.
Matt. Now I would like to invite Divya to share her work.
Hi guys, I'm going to take a minute here to try to share the screen.
We were able to see your screen earlier, Divya.
You were? Okay, let me go back and do that back again. I think the best way. Hold on, guys. Are you able to see it now?
I believe you're muted as well.
I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. But the slides are, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now everything looks okay? All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to start by saying thank you to the City of Cleveland for taking lead on sustainability for over a decade. And then over the last few years, readjusting its pathway to embed an equity toolkit into it with the community feedback. I know it's a daunting experience, and ahead lies the important task of building more programs. I'm also super excited for the Lead for Cities project that's going to quantify all our advances if we've made all these efforts. I'm looking forward to sort of seeing where our big successes are and where we have big gaping holes, so we may be intentional about how we move forward on them. And it's with expertise like that of Matt and Ethan's here at GreenLink that whose platforms and expertise we're going to take to combine with the input that we get from the community, who we'll have at the table to create intentionality in whatever programming that we do. So I want to thank everybody. And I also want to thank, and I want to congratulate the city on its first summit post the 2019. I'm Divya. I'm the manager at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. I'm the manager of climate resiliency and sustainability at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. And at CNP, our mission is to foster inclusive communities of choice, and where those communities are is where they call home. And in my role, we do it at the intersection of built and unbuilt spaces. And we are, over the last many years, we are trying to be very intentional about how we think about equity as it has spanned, as we should be, that we've neglected over the many years. Predating me at CNP, we did a Kresge-funded program that many of you know about here that engaged 16 climate ambassadors in 4 neighborhoods. What I have here on the screen is an infographic that came out of that 4-year project that talked about the various impacts of climate change as it were to affect Cleveland. We did about 18 projects in 6 different areas. The key component of this project was the 16 climate ambassadors we had on this project, who really were the ears on the ground, the feet on the sidewalk, sort of taking that information from what you hear and truth testing it to what we see, when we read what programs that come. What we learned from that is we have a lot of areas that we need to tackle. We've had vacant land issues. We have food deserts in Cleveland. We have poor air quality, ranks number 9 nationwide. So we have high asthma rates. We have urban heat islands, and then we have intensifying storms. What reports have showed, this is a GLISA map. It shows that we are creeping up slowly on our temperature, and that heat is a pernicious killer. So we don't know when it's going to creep upon us. It's like the Toad story. So we better be prepared at this point for what's going to come 10 years our way, 15 years down, and 20 years. This is because the legacy that we are going to leave for our children and grandchildren. So we know that the Great Lakes area is increasing rapidly at about 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, that number is really from 1956 to 2012. That's the data point, and we have more increased heat days. That means that we have the incidences of high ozone days where breathing is difficult is also higher. When we see this kind of heat creeping up, immediately comes to our mind is how do we balance that heat? Immediately, our intention is to turn on air conditioning, whether it is heating during winters or cooling during summer months. It's one of those big entities that guzzles a lot of energy. So a big role, one of our here on our screen is Ms. Priscilla Fain, who was our climate ambassador from the Central Kinsman neighborhood. And she identified that that neighborhood has a lot of utility burdens, is one of those top utility burden neighborhoods. So what we've been doing sort of builds on some of the work that she's done, is really focusing on her role was to go door to door and try to educate, demonstrate to residents and educate them about the weatherization options that are available, that CHN has been administering for many decades now, the PIP and heat programs that they have. Again, this is sort of helping residents give them some relief or create bill payment plans that are conducive to them. So that was one of the things that she did. And in the ambassadors around the neighborhood also put together a cooling center in that neighborhood, which was solar powered. So that kicked off a lot of what work we started to engage with the ACEEE, which is the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy. And being on two of those working groups there has shed a lot of light on how different cities are tackling energy burdens. And of course, we know that if we were to energy burdens, renewable energy, quality, clean air, everything's tied in. And at this point, to come to a point of clean energy, we need to sort of both tackle energy efficiency and get to a point of renewable energy. The work from the Kresge also got us to actively participate with the Water Equity Task Force. The Water Equity Task Force really looked at the access for clean and safe water for Cleveland's residents. Pre-COVID, there were at least, we don't have utility numbers that are clear. It's always hard to get numbers. We learned that there are nearly 4,500 residents across along our Great Lake here that didn't have access to clean water because of high water costs. And then that also around the work. So we've been actively engaged with that, and we've worked on a model called the Water Champions model that is based off of the Climate Ambassador work. It's really, we're still looking for applicants for that job. There's a posting out there, CHN's recruiting to identify who are those people, leaders in the community that we can train, that can hear the stories of what's true in the community and what causes them to, how do we bridge the gap between access to water and the affordability plans that exist that allow them to have that access, or what other problems exist around water. And then we've been working with the Cleveland Tree Coalition to do many deforestation projects. The city of Cleveland has been a partner. We work with them on air quality projects. Now we've worked last with them on updating the air quality, sort of getting feedback on air quality in different communities. And we will be working with them longer on that as well, aside from working with the Office of Sustainability on several other programs. We've also been working on a cumulative impacts program, which is really to take the information that the residents talked about with their air quality, with their health, with access to, poor access to transit, to everything that sort of, and then what compounds a cumulative deterioration in people's quality of life as they live in that, community. So we've been convening around that as well. But what I'm focusing on here is our work with the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, which in learning from all this, is around 5 pillars, and then it's all centered around equity. We are tackling here, the components are, as you can see, climate and clean energy planning. Utility programs play a big role in this. Workforce development, that Matt talked about, the potential of having 2 Coca-Cola's worth of job potential here, and that would be clean jobs that will work towards upward mobility for communities, Black and brown communities here that are struggling and living in low income situations. And we've this working group, this equity working group, has also given us a way to look closer into how to track our city's progress. So Cleveland ranks has slipped 2 points from 27 to 29 in this overall city ranking score, but really has performed a little bit better, comparing against itself, has moved forward a little bit. But where we sort of are doing well regionally is in our community administered programs, community-wide initiatives. CHN's doing a great job as we on utility programs. And I think as we sort of move forward, that really helps us drill down to where we need to focus some of our energies. So another working group that we've been a part of, Matt talked about his equity map, the process guide that came with it. That's particularly exciting for us because I mentioned previously, as we worked with the Water Equity Task Force, it has been particularly daunting to get any information on how to do targeted engagement with residents who can benefit from programs that exist, or try to create programs that might suit them. So we don't have access to that kind of information to see what really works for our community. So getting to be a part of a national group of, across 8 cities, this was a Kresge funded project facilitated by, Upright Services with Matt's team, to see how can we use the tool that they talked about to really engage our residents in a targeted way, and how can we form collaborative and trusted ways of working with our partners as an organization that acts as an intermediary. Our commitment lies to our residents to make sure that what programs are available at the city and at the other higher institutional level is transferred appropriately, equitably within the community. So, and then using this kind of tool was really going to allow us to focus some of our efforts in the right direction. I just wanted to, Matt already talked about this, but I just wanted to point out, show this map once again to everybody. This is just the average utility burdens, just taking it by race. This is a snapshot of what it looks like in white communities, in neighborhoods where it's predominantly white. This is in, what you see in brown community, Hispanic communities. And here's what you see as the impact in Black communities. So you really see that our Black and brown communities are really the ones that are left behind. And when we talk about acting towards climate change, we don't get to acting on climate change if we are focusing on just climate change policy without addressing social justice, environmental justice. So this is really a climate justice issue. So if we were to start having projects and programs, it really makes bodes well for us to pause for a few minutes, think about, slow down, be intentional about how our engagement is going to be, to really bring the right people to the table, to concentrate our resources right. Think about what kinds of languages that we need to have this conversation in, engagement in. Typically, we engage people who are able to come. If we have a tree program that allows, that we want to plant trees in, we are able to blast it on a tree mail, or we blast it on, or we paste it in a few community centers saying we have a tree planting or a tree giveaway program. But are we really accessing the people that really need these trees to reduce? I mean, we know trees reduce the temperature by 10 degrees or more. That plays a huge role in the heating and cooling for a house. And maybe in the neighborhoods that we are planting this tree, maybe there is not much access to resources that they have to maintain the tree. So how can we be, when we are trying to up our tree canopy from 19% to 30% over the next 10 years, how are we going to create targeted neighborhood tree plants that in neighborhoods, they look different? In some neighborhoods, they can be maintained by tree stewards who have the time and resources to be able to contribute their time to taking care of trees. But in some neighborhoods, you need to make sure you put a hardy tree that can take care of itself, or create programs, work with the city of Cleveland in its water permitting programs, or work with Western Reserve and Holden to identify the right kinds of trees. So when we put them in, we're doing the right thing. Just in a different session now, I heard that the biggest difficulty that a lot of community gardens are facing, we know we have to with food deserts, right? And community gardens are facing, they're terming out of their 5-year water permit that allows them to have subsidized rates for their water. So when we look at this map, this is our Trust for Public Lands Climate Smart Cities map. When we sort of overlay all this information, how do we begin to target our resources? What are programs that are already being talked by the city of Cleveland? Is there a first year Cleveland program? Is the Let's Save program? There is a CHN's working on CHN and the sewer district. They partner together on the utility program. When all these different programs and entities exist, and they all have a similar pattern of where they affect, how do we begin to start to access our assets in the institutional and community capacity to have these conversations? So that really is the crux of this, is how do we use all this data to build the right strategy for engagement for us. So that was a snapshot of what we've been doing. In terms of other things that we've been doing reforestation projects. We have, but we focus those projects in the Central Kinsman neighborhood, where the tree planting, where the canopy is at 12%, much lower than the city of Cleveland's 19%. We have a long way to go to 30% tree canopy. In these very neighborhoods, we need to create some sort of a community heat plan that allows for the community to come together, especially now during COVID, when we were lucky this year. I think we had far fewer heat days than we've had in the past. But we didn't have access to the usual water cooling centers. Those cooling pads. We didn't have access, at the same kind of access to the rec centers. What happens then? How do we sort of create programs, targeted programs that sort of can take care of our community? So, before I wrap up, I just want to say that we have been coming together to think about this not as a isolated thing, not looking at heat island, not looking at air pollution, not looking at nutrition deficiency as individual things, but we need to start looking at all these things as cumulative impacts of one over the other. So as we start to roll out programs, as we start to build developments or have economic opportunity, we have to see where are the gaps, what needs to come to certain communities that has been taken away from them structurally as we established over the last 400 years. How do we replenish? How do we sort of restore equity? How do we do some restorative justice work, looking at all these things, and not just go because a project has to be completed in a certain timeline or completed to a certain prescriptive mechanism. With that, I just want to share two last things to close. One, definitely, please take the survey. I think that's the first step in for us to gather what our starting point is. And then this is only the first step. We are going to use everything, all the partnerships and collaborations to understand how we can best roll this out with feedback. We don't get very far without the community feedback. So we will certainly be reaching out through you through whatever channels that we have access to do this. Through CNP, we'll be reaching out. Through your CDCs, will be reaching out. Through the Organizers and Allies Network, we'll be reaching out to you through the economic opportunity groups, because this has a huge potential, and we'd like everybody to sort of participate and share their story. The second thing, please vote. Just please vote, because we just know that 100 policies, environmental policies, have been rolled back at this point. They're either 68 of them have been rolled back, and about 32 are in the process of being rolled back. There is no time for us to sort of wait for a unified action, although that's what we need to vote for to make that happen. So we have to have both local action. We saw what happened at HB6. So I think I'm just stressing on the point that we are going to be using all this kind of data that we've seen to do targeted, to do more intentional engagement, and work with you all on how to incorporate this for a more just future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Divya. Thank you very much, Divya, for sharing, such a comprehensive share on some of the intentional collaborative engagements that you have been working through CNP on this, addressing climate policies and programs within Cleveland. Truly appreciate this presentation, and thank you, Matt, for a very valuable presentation. I would also like to emphasize and share once again that this is just the first of many conversations on this topic regarding 100% clean and renewable electricity commitment. So please let's join us and continuing the discussion in November, because during our monthly meeting, I are left with 4 minutes, and probably since Divya touched upon HB6, if I would call Matt to talk, have this ambitious local goal in the landscape, in the city landscape, where our state is less progressive. So how do you, as GreenLink, envision this process, of achieving renewable energy goal? When you're talking about various scenario comparison models, do you consider, such type of changes? And where do you see us being informed through this process, Matt?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and certainly one that many cities struggle with. It's a big question, especially in communities where the goals of the city and the community may not be the same as the goals of the state. So we've got a terrible academic term for that. That's adversarial polycentrism, but the net effect of that is that you may be working at counter purposes. And so in those cases, we tend to take a look at just how the city could accomplish its goals. And then if you're able to move the state in your direction, then that's all icing on the cake. But the goal, if we're in a spot where there's just really not much hope, is to take a look just at what's within our control, within the city's control, and figure out how to make progress and achieve the goals regardless. And then we'll talk about looking at this is how far you get. So Atlanta is actually kind of a good example there, where Atlanta is only able to get 2/3 of the way to 100% clean energy without getting the state involved, or without seeing the federal government get involved, one or the other or both. And so at some point, there's going to be a need for the city to get engaged at the Public Utilities Commission, to get engaged in conversations with the state legislature, and to start making sure that at least the elected folks know what the position is of the city on these topics. And to that end, Atlanta did actually engage in the rate case for Georgia Power, their utility, for the very first time ever last winter. So I think that message has been received, and some actions are starting to be taken, and we're seeing groups of cities actually come together and make demands of those statewide bodies, as we've seen in Michigan's actually a good example of that, where there's been about 7 cities that have come together to start to make some demands, make sure that their voices are heard. Utah as well.
Thank you so much, Matt. See, one of the questions from Sarah asking about, does City of look into nuclear power plants as part of their 100% goal? The answer to that is no. But Matt, would you like to weigh in on?
Generally, we don't include it, but we wait for the answer to come back out of the communities that we're talking with around that as to how that's going to be defined. We've yet to work with a community that wanted to include nuclear as a part of that definition, so it's been very uniform across our analyses so far.
Thank you, Matt. And we are just about time to complete this session. And I would like to, first of all, thank our robust panelists, Matt Cox and Sri, for joining us today, and to all the participants for joining us in this breakout session. If you would like to stay connected on this topic, please do send me an email, and I would also encourage you to fill out the survey link posted by Elsa just now, as there is also a section in that blog which has a survey link to complete your contact information on the survey. And that's a way that we can reach out to you when our monthly meeting is scheduled and for future discussion on this topic. And please do join us for our final breakout session, which is next on trees, youths and sustainability and community engagement. And please look out for our monthly meeting again with our energy manager and the energy team, along with myself, talking about this topic in depth. And thank you once again. Thank you all.